On today's podcast, we welcome music supervisor Nick Haussling. We discuss how music and songs are selected for advertising, who the decision makers are, and how budget often determines what music is chosen. You don't want to miss it. Insiders, are you ready?
Welcome to MUBUTV's Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage artists and music business professionals who are dedicated to having a successful career in the new music industry. Here are your hosts, Rich Ezra and Eric Knight. Welcome back, Insiders, to another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage your music career. On today's episode, we sit down with music supervisor Nick Haussling. We discuss how music and songs are selected for advertising, who the decision makers are, and how budget often determines what music is chosen. You don't want to miss it. But first, a word from our sponsor. Hey Insiders, are you looking to take your music career to the next level? Then you need to know about the Music Business Registry. The Music Business Registry is the leading music industry publisher of the most up-to-date contact information for major and independent record label A&R, music publishers, artist managers, music attorneys, music supervisors, and much, much more. The Music Business Registry is the trusted industry standard and source, serving the music business community for over 28 years with the most accurate and up-to-date contact information available. Their titles include the A&R Registry, the Film and Television Music Monthly, the Music Publisher Registry, and the Music Attorney Registry. All of their publications are available in print, PDF, CSV, or online subscription. Visit them now at musicregistry.com and receive a 10% discount by using coupon code MUBUTV10 at checkout. That's musicregistry.com, coupon code MUBUTV10. When you're ready to put your music to work, musicregistry.com.
Welcome back, Insiders. Today's featured guest is with Nick Haussling, who is the music supervisor at Walton Isaacson. This was a really interesting conversation, Eric, because this gets into an area of music supervision which is distinct from film and from television. This was a conversation with somebody who's a music supervisor specifically for the world of advertising, and that has its own rules, its own regulations, and its own ways of operating. And one of the things that I thought was so interesting about what our conversation was with Nick was when he talked about, a couple things, his own background in A&R, which I thought was really interesting and how he got the job, but also the idea of how budget, the money, will often determine what songs are selected for the particular project.
Right.
And I know that money is a realistic factor, but how, you can often determine the direction of something with something that's more expensive creatively versus something that's just going to be a stock track. And this, I think, goes to the heart of, things that we've talked about before with regards to, do you want the music to lead? Do you want the music to almost be a distraction? Or do you want it to support your product?
Yeah, I agree. First, I want to say I love Nick. Nick is just a great guy, and it was great having him on the show because of his experience and background of being an A&R and now doing the switch to music supervision. One of the things that I really loved about this interview was when he took us through the journey from inception to completion of a spot. I thought that was fascinating. And we've talked to several people before, Josh Rabinowitz, that used to be at Gray, Brooklyn Music Experience. And it's just interesting to always hear how that journey starts and how it comes to its eventual conclusion.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. And who the decision makers are.
Absolutely. And with that, sit back, relax, and enjoy our featured conversation with Nick Haussling.
Nick, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I always like to begin these conversations with the question, when in your life did you know that the music business was going to be your professional career path?
Wow. Probably 6 years old. I mean, I was looking at the back of my parents' record collections. I grew up without a TV, so all we did was listen to the radio. Grew up like Northern Virginia, right outside of DC. So they had a great, just up and down the dial. I would just listen and become a sponge of whatever I was listening to. So, and I would look at the back of my parents' record and be like, who is this producer, or who is this songwriter, or what's this Criteria Studios on the back of Bee Gees records, right? So it just kind of fascinated me, and I just as I grew up, I was like, oh, who's in charge of those people? And it was people that worked at record companies. So I was like, oh, I think I could do that.
So you pursued a career in music.
I mean, I went to college, I got a marketing degree, and as soon as I graduated, a buddy who went to college with was living out here in LA, and I would call him every day. I'm like, any jobs, any jobs? He's like, you just got to come out here. So I took the call, came out, and he introduced me to somebody who was working at Geffen Records at the time in business affairs. And I just went over and had a hang. And she was like, you're pretty cool. Go apply for a job in the mailroom. And that was my first gigs.
Wow, with Geffen on Sunset.
Yeah, on Sunset. Yeah, yeah. We're going late 90s on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nick, this is Eric. Thank you so much for doing this with us. We're really honored to have you here.
Thank you.
You have an extensive background in A&R. And how has that experience helped you in your current role as a music supervisor in advertising?
Yeah. So yeah, I made this kind of interesting jump that people go, oh, wow, you're going from A&R to music supervision. And I don't think it's that crazy of a jump. I think it's still being able to work with creators, still being able to help music get created. So, and that was always the part of A&R that I loved. I loved the, helping people make the records, right? So I think bringing that part of it to music supervision at an ad agency is super helpful. So that's been, being able to help creators and it's still finding songs that work for an advertisement. So it's I think having that background in A&R has really helped me in this music supervision that I'm currently in. So.
Oh, absolutely. It definitely does. And plus you have an extensive background in A&R. It's not just, a couple of years. You've been in it a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me ask you, Nick, once you land the client, can you take us through the process and the anatomy creatively and business-wise from inception to like creation of a spot? And at what stage does music become a factor in that process when you're working with somebody on a spot?
Yeah. So I think I'm pretty much right away. I'm in meetings with the creatives as they are coming up with their concepts. They want me in these meetings early to understand what music is going to play a role in. And then once the creatives, and client decide on the spot that's going to happen, then we figure out what the budget is for the music. And then that really dictates where I'm going to go. Am I going to license a big time track? Am I going to come up with something original? Or am I going to get just a regular, kind of stock track, right? So that really dictates it. And then once we know what the budget is, then we go get it done. So, and then it could be, once you get the track, you present it. Usually there's a lot of changes. The clients, are super specific on what they want. So you have to be able to talk to them about, changing a melody or changing a hook and remember, you have to do this within, 30 seconds, right? You have to help this music tell a story and take, the spot, whatever emotional, turn it needs or whatever. So that's always super important. And then, once everybody's decided on that and agrees on it, then, you go mix the track or mix it within the spot. And then after that, I'm dealing with, licensing agreements or paperwork or dealing with the, whoever owns the track and just getting the agreement together. So it's a bunch of different parts in it. That's super exciting. And, plus being an A&R and understanding agreements as well. So that's really helped me with this role as well. So,
I want to ask you, Nick, who are the decision makers that give the final green light as to what music gets used in the spot? Yeah.
Well, ultimately it's the client, right? But I think I'm there to give my expertise. The creatives are there to give their opinion on what they like. And, hopefully in the end, it's a collaborative thing, but really the client is the one that whatever they like, it's my job to get it to where they like it. But, with a little push from me as well to say, hey, this is sounding good. Let's go there.
You touched on this before, and I just want to go a little deeper with it on the concept of how much does budget factor into your choice of music in the choices that you make for the spots that you're doing. And maybe you can sort of give examples of, larger budget, medium budget, and also from a creative standpoint, like, no, we have a big budget, but we don't want to use a song that's going to be intrusive, or we want to use a piece of music, but not lyric, or, the different kind of creative decisions that you're going to make regarding a spot, whether it's big money or little money.
Yeah. So I think when the project comes in and the budget, the decision to find a track is really based on the budget. So you got a big budget, I'm going to go license a big time track, right? So, and if it's middle or what, like a mid budget, I can go get something created originally. And if it's a lower budget, you just go to a music house or just kind of get that regular stock track. So, but if I feel that the budget isn't right or isn't enough, then I will push to say, hey, let's get a little bit more in there so we can really, get that quality track. Because from my background, I want to bring more of a quality to it, because sometimes I think there's a lot of, music houses and things that have tons of music, right? But I think I'm more about having something that's good quality than good quality than quantity. It's more about how it's sounding, how good it sounds, as opposed to like, oh, here's 100 tracks. We have 100 tracks. Like, you just use one, and it's like, let's be selective and really bring something of quality.
Do you ever talk to a client about perhaps tone of the commercial musically? Like, maybe this would be better served with an instrumental rather than a vocal that's going to communicate that story, or that's going to more support your creative as opposed to just a vocal.
Yes, absolutely. I think I'm not the end all to say, oh, this is what needs to be. But I think with myself and the creatives explaining to the client, hey, this is really going to set the tone for the spot, so.
Do you find that clients are more open to a wider level of creative choices when it comes to musical choices today?
I think so, yes. But they also have an idea of what they want and what works best. And, like I said, in the end, it's the client's right. But, I feel that everybody's pretty open to discussing it and seeing what the best fit would be.
Let me ask you something, Nick. As more and more brands create content specifically for online or websites or social media, does this give you any additional creative freedom in your music choices in that time isn't as significant a factor as it would be with perhaps ads on TV or radio, or is it the same for you creatively?
It's definitely more wide open because there are so many more opportunities, whether it's something for online, whether it's for TV broadcasts, whether it's for socials, whether it's, there's so many opportunities to use music. I think it's amazing, right? Wide open.
So are you using music in various ways? Are ad agencies creating content for various platforms rather than just an ad for television for the client or just an ad for socials? I mean, are you doing it for a wide variety, and do you make different musical choices depending on the platform?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it definitely depends on the platform, but yeah, we could have a TV spot. We could have a social post only, Instagram, Facebook, and any of those kind of social posts. And that could be a different music could be used in that for the same product that they're playing.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is that different musical choices. And I think that gives you kind of a broader sense of creative freedom of, we can do this for the TV ad, but we can do this, which is longer or, cheaper or whatever, because the spot can be longer. It can be a minute rather than 30 seconds or whatever. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there could be like, if you have like, say, a 60-second spot, you could break it down to a 30-second, to a 15, even 6 seconds. Like it's pretty crazy how that they could break down
Yeah, for like
one
YouTube
spot.
ads, for like those playing right in front before somebody clicks off.
Yeah.
I've seen millions of those.
Yeah. Super small. And it's interesting once it gets down to that small, how much like, music they use, if any. It's just kind of like super short, but it ends up working. Like I think they're able to like
I
really
see
pull
that it
off.
does work. Yeah, because when I'm looking at those ads right before I click off on it, I was like, wow, they encapsulated a lot into that little tiny spot, and they
Yeah.
did a good job of it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, Nick, when you come across a new composer whose work, it is that you really like, is it ever a problem trying to sell an unknown entity to a client?
Not really. I think a lot of people I talk to are kind of intrigued about the ad space and wanting to work on things. Like I don't think I've ever had a problem with saying, hey, we have this Pepsi spot that we're working on. I need something that sounds kind of like a Jack Harlow, kind of beat. And that's how I got a new composer involved. He was like, hey, let me give it a shot. And we ended up using it. So yeah, I'm always open, always looking for different people. I think that's, how I learned to, even back when I was doing A&R, it's like getting in, meeting people early, seeing what they have. And then, you never know who you're going to meet or who you're going to work with that ends up bringing you something great. So I'm always of the mind of being wide open to work with anybody.
Hey, Insiders, we hope that you've been enjoying our featured interview. Stay tuned because we've got so much more value coming your way. But before we dive back in, a word from our sponsor. So, hey, Rich, tell me a little bit about the Music Business Registry.
Well, what we are, Music Business Registry is the leading contact directory. We publish all of the most current, accurate, and up-to-date contact information for the music industry. We do directories for A&R. We do directories for music publishers. We do directories for film and television music. We do directories of artist managers, and we do directories of music attorneys. And we also sell other publications too, like the Indie Bible series, the YouTube Bible series, the Indie Spotify Bible series, and other things as well. That's what we're about.
So if I wanted to find out, let's say, the music supervisor for American Horror Story, I can kind of go into the Film and TV monthly and find the information that I need there?
Well, we don't list specific shows. If you know who the music supervisor is, and you can find that out on IMDb, then you can find their contact information. And we have that in our Film and Television Music Monthly. Absolutely, yes.
That's great. And I hear that we have a discount right now. If you go to musicregistry.com and use coupon code MUBUTV10 at checkout, you'll receive 10% off your first order.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, we offer that to all of the MUBUTV insiders.
So insiders, check out musicregistry.com and use MUBUTV10 as your coupon code.
Do you find that clients are open when you say, hey, it's Nick, I found this great composer. They don't necessarily have a huge amount of credits, but I think this is the right composer for this particular spot. Do you ever have trouble selling a client like that?
No, because I think, unless we're licensing like something they want like a big time artist, right? But if we're working on something original and the spot doesn't really call for, a big celebrity or whatever, I think they're wide open to like, hey, if this sounds good, let's go for it. It's not, oh, who is this unknown person that I don't know. It's definitely different than an A&R where they're like, oh, well, who mixed the track? Oh, we want a big time mixer on it, right? I think it's definitely different in the ad space. So.
And do you run into that problem where you have a client that comes in that already has a very clear vision and they want to use one of these big songs, but it just doesn't match their budget? And
yeah, and I think it's easy to go, well, look at the budget. This is what you're getting for the budget that you want, and if you want somebody of a bigger caliber, then we need to up the budget. So that's how I was kind of counter. Like, do you want to raise the budget? If you do, then we'll go get them. But other than that, I feel that this is of quality within those parameters, and usually it's a go.
In your position, you're kind of serving two different entities. You're serving the client, and you're serving, I guess, the creative of the actual spot that you're doing for your company. I'm curious if you've ever come across or had a situation where a client comes in with the budget and says, we want this, but you or your team feel, I know you got the money, but this is creatively wrong for what you're trying to do. That's kind of a subtler thing. And I wondered if you've ever come across that.
Honestly, right now I haven't. But to tell you how I would approach it, right, is look, I think I'd have to, use my background and my expertise of like, and to explain to him why this would be the right choice to go with, So I think it's like, look, I have a track record. I've been working in the music field for a while, and I think you just have to really use your knowledge and explain to them why it's the best decision. It's kind of like back when I had to tell an artist that their song wasn't great, but you want to use a different, we should use this producer because of this. And just having a relationship is so important, or, just gaining somebody's, respect and being able to have a good relationship with the person to be like, hey, this is what I think let's at least try it. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else, but let's at least give it a go. You never know.
And continuing on that theme, getting the right people for the work you need and to create music for your projects is a large part of the job, whether that's songs or the clearance or a new composer. What's the best way for someone who's an independent artist or a publisher or a label to learn what your musical needs are and to get on your radar?
Hit me up. I am open to, I try to respond to everybody. There's only enough hours in the day, but if you reach out to me and say, hey, I'm new, I'm interested in getting my music to you, just reach out to me. And I understand that aspect of it, of trying to reach out to people. So I always try to be super open about it. Yes, I can't get back to everybody, but I do try my best, and just actually pick up the phone and call me.
Nick, throughout your life, what books or films have really inspired you, professionally speaking, that you could recommend to our audience?
Oh my goodness. Are we talking new things or just
anything that influenced you that you think that would help our audience? It doesn't even have to necessarily be music related.
Yeah, anything I ever try to talk about is music related. So, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listened, like your guys' Kolodner one was so informative. That was
thank you. It was informative to us.
Yeah, I bet.
I'd never had a conversation with John like for that long ever.
Well, when we talked on the phone, you told me how it happened. Like running into him at the dentist office. I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
But I listened to Questlove has a great podcast that I listen to all the time. I listen to Left Set's podcast. I listen to the Rockin' Tours. You know that one from over in England? It's Guy Pratt and Gary from Spandau Ballet. They interview it's a lot of European or British based acts, but they've done a bunch of American artists too. So it's not just artists, it's like producers, or they had Trevor Horn on one time, or like things like that. So a lot of podcasts. I love still learning about the industry and just hearing different people's stories. So
very much
great.
So. Yeah, I still listen to all of that stuff and read all of those books and watch all those documentaries.
Oh,
Rick Rubin has a new book. And he had that phenomenal documentary. I don't know if you've seen it yet, called Shangri-La.
Yeah.
Amazing. Oh my God. That was, I must have, I show it to my students. So I think I have seen that documentary. It's 4 hours long. I think I've seen it. I must have seen, it must be like 8 to 10 times now.
Yeah.
But it's such an incredible documentary on the creative process.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just spectacular on how he pulled, because that's the big thing about Rick. Like, how does he pull that out of people? And that documentary goes deep dive into how he does it and what his thinking is behind that whole thing.
Yeah.
Spectacular.
I love all those things that just show them the behind the scenes of how things are done. And, I love those. Do you remember the classic album?
Oh, very.
We talked about that a few times.
Like
absolutely.
The Steely Dan one is great. On
Asia
is like so great, where they isolate Michael McDonald's vocals, and like it's amazing. Love it.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen the one on the classic album series of Who's Next. the album by The Who.
Oh, The Who. Yeah.
That one is
yeah.
unbelievable because he tells the story how this was an album that was never meant to be.
Yeah.
Was never they never set out to do it. He set out to make Lifehouse, which was this massive project to follow Tommy, and it all fell apart.
Yeah.
The whole thing fell apart, and all he could do at the time was collect the 8 songs that he thought were, decent enough to cobble together for an album because he needed something.
Wow.
But it was never intended to be the masterpiece and the classic that it was.
So great.
It was out of the ashes of the disaster that was Lighthouse that he never ever finished. But it's those stories are just fascinating. Every one of these albums, Yellow Brick Road, Elton's Yellow Brick Road has that so much of that footage of writing that album. Elton would say, I'd write the song in 15 minutes and, bring it down to Bernie, and he would, Bernie would give me the lyric and I'd write the song in 15 minutes. And it was just, that incredible period of inspiration. It's just so great when you watch those things.
There's one other one. It's pretty funny. The Ray Parker Jr. has one where, it shows his life because he was like a 15-year-old playing with
Prodigy.
Motown, right?
Yeah, studio.
And playing with Stevie Wonder and it shows old footage of him playing with Stevie and stuff like that. That was pretty cool too.
Wow, yeah, I knew Ray very well when he worked at he didn't work, but he recorded for us at Arista when I worked there.
Yeah, that's right. All those hits.
All those records. Yeah, it was when he stopped being a session player and became a recording artist and a writer and had lots and lots of hits. And great guy.
Yeah,
really, really great guy and very, very knowledgeable.
Yeah,
and went on even after he stopped. Having hits as an artist, continued to be a studio producer and a musician for a lot of other people.
Yeah.
So
just the whole history of music is so intriguing, and it's there's so many things that you can watch, and especially nowadays, it's like tons of things on streaming, even on like old YouTube clips and stuff. It's just. You could go on a deep dive all day, so it's great.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nick, let me ask you, what advice can you offer our listeners who are wanting to pursue a career in either A&R or in music supervision and advertising? What advice do you have for them?
Wow. I think if this is what you want to do, right? If that's what you're passionate about, find a way to do it, right? Find a way. Like, even if you don't know anybody, get in on the ground floor and work your way up. Is it getting an internship at your favorite company that you like? Hey, are you guys hiring for summer interns? Like, just be persistent without being annoying, right? And get in there and meet people. I think that's super important. Like when I started, I was like going out to shows all the time and hanging out, going to parties, and I thought it was a partying thing, but really I quickly learned that it was like I'd see people at night, and then I would go into the office the next day and they would be like, "Oh, I saw you out the other night." And I was like quickly learned that was a networking thing, right? So I think networking is super important, and if you don't know somebody, like, get in on the ground floor and work your way up.
Nick, flipping that question around, what advice do you have for our listeners who are wanting to pursue a career as a recording artist? What would you?
Well, songs. Come up with great songs. I think if you come up with a great song, they will find you. You will be found, right? But it's also the networking part of that goes into it too. It's like get people to hear your song, but it really comes down to having great songs, and that's on the A&R front. That's on the music supervision part. Like, we're always looking for great songs.
Always comes down, as our friend Don Grierson said, it all starts with great songs.
Yep.
That's and that from your A&R background and experience. It definitely does.
Yeah.
Nick, where can people best connect with you and at Walton Isaacson? Where's the best way? Is it through the website or?
You can email me. It's nick.haussling@waltonisaacson.com.
Beautiful.
That's the easiest way. Hit me up. Say you heard me here, and I will absolutely respond to you.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Nick, we can't thank you enough for doing this.
Thank you so
really,
much.
really appreciate it.
This is a pleasure. Very, very honored. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
All right.
It was our honor. Thank you for doing it. What a great conversation with Nick.
Nick is amazing.
I really enjoyed that, and he's such a nice man.
Yeah.
It was great seeing him and having this. So, here's the thing. I mean, one of the things that was so interesting about this conversation is, number one, he got into this because his own background was in A&R.
Right.
And as he said at the start of the conversation, he didn't see it as that big of a leap.
Jump. Yeah.
Yeah, of a jump going from A&R into, specifically, I guess, A&R for brands, if you will.
And I also thought that it was still his chance to still be creative and work with creators. So it's almost like nothing ever changed. It's like he's picking songs like he would probably pick songs on a record that were going to go for singles or what have you. So I thought that was really interesting. And again, as I said at the top of the show, when we talked about taking us through that journey from inception to creation of a spot, just how many people are involved in the process. It's not just obviously the client and him. There's several different people, the editors, the people that shot the actual spot, how that spot is being mixed in the overall thing of the piece. And so those are all just really always very fascinating to me, how those things come together.
Absolutely. And the other aspect that I thought was so interesting about this conversation too, Eric, was at what stage does music come into the conversation?
Right.
And Nick was saying right at
Early
the very
on.
beginning, early on, that he's in on those early meetings so that he can get a sense of the sensibility, the style, the direction, and the ideas that they're thinking about creatively for his particular aspect of the work. Also, who the decision makers are, like you were saying, oftentimes are not just the client, but also who at the client's company is making those decisions.
They're the ultimate decision maker. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And how, I've heard where that can literally change 180.
Right.
In a single, like we've decided to go in a whole different direction. So they will literally scrap a song and go with it something in an entirely different kind of vibe and mode.
And also the budget, how the budget can tell you what you can do or what you can't do. We've had many conversations where people said, well, I really want that, Zeppelin track. Well, that Zeppelin track is going to cost you $1 million. So it's probably completely out of your budget. And we need to, kind of bring the dreams of down in terms of, what you want to have for that spot. And I also think that, this is one that's always important to hear. And Nick reiterated that was that, you're ultimately helping the music client tell the story via the music.
Yeah, very, very much so. I think that, ultimately it's about serving the product. And ultimately, I think that the other facet that I thought was so interesting today in this conversation with Nick is how brands today are much more open to a far, far wider and more diverse variety of music than at any other time in history.
Hey, Insiders, thanks so much for tuning into this episode. We really appreciate it. To get show notes, links, and everything that was mentioned during this interview, head on over to our official website at MUBUTV.com/podcast/show notes. If you're enjoying the content and what we're doing here on the show, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts from. And don't forget to rate and review our show at iTunes. 5-star reviews are always welcome and help to ensure that our podcast stands out on the top-rated and new and noteworthy charts on iTunes and our space. You can also find us at social media at Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter X, all ending with the handle MUBUTV, which is spelled MUBUTV. Don't forget to catch our flagship show, the MUBUTV Music Business Insider video series, airing every week on YouTube at youtube.com/MUBUTV. This show was produced and created by Rich Ezra and Eric Knight. Theme music by Disciples of Babylon, and be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast.